Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto mastered the Hiraishin with Jiraiya's training, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now start the fanfic. Takane Nobata was a middle-aged man with long black hair and coal-black eyes, wearing the standard garb of a Kiri Chunin. At the age of 11 he had graduated the academy, killing off the person he had spent his entire time with there, as was the standard graduation exam before the graduation was changed thanks to Zabuza. Over the years he kept average stats, with an average number of missions. He became a Chunin after his 6th try in Iwa and continued on to become an average ninja. When the Bloodline Wars started he had stayed with the Mizukage. While he did not really care about the sides or killing bloodline bearers, he was loyal and would not betray the Mizukage. Altogether there was nothing special about him, he was a fairly average person. It was that average status that had gotten him and his team killed. His team, which had been comprised of 2 genin, 1 jonin and himself, had been tasked with raiding various towns alongside a group of bandits. While he had not liked what they were doing he had no choice and it was an easy task. They would let the bandits do all the work and then take their share for allowing it. If the bandits tried to resist it was their job to kill them and find another group to steal money for them. The group he was with had gone to one of the rendezvous points to collect their pay, only to find out too late that it was an ambush and the bloodline users had disguised themselves and set several traps. Takane had been killed after an hour of torture, giving any and all information he had on himself and whatever he knew about the Mizukage's forces. After they had gotten the information they needed out of him and the Kiri Jonin, he had been killed. Naruto, using Shinsei Henge, True Transformation, a jutsu he had created using his SS class Kinjutsu, Forbidden Jutsu, the Oroki no Jutsu, he had created a true transformation. Unlike the standard henge of the academy, which is considered by some to be a ninjutsu, genjutsu hybrid that creates an illusion over one's form and could easily be dispelled. The Shinsei henge was a true physical transformation. Rather than applying a layer of chakra over the body to create an illusion, this creates a real physical body. Naruto staggered as he made his way up to the main gates of the large base for one of the Mizukage's forces, holding his side which was bleeding, as his breath came out in haggard gasps. As he got to the gate the shinobi in the watchtower spotted him and called down to 2 shinobi who were standing guard inside the gate, which began to open with a creak as one of the guards went to get the commander while the other came out of the gate and walked in front of him just as he began to stumble. "What happened to you?" the man asked as he slung Takane's arm over his shoulder and helped him up. "Be bloodline rebels," Takane gasped out, using a bit of wind chakra to cut up his gums, making it look like he had blood coming up from his throat. The commander of the base came just as Takane started explaining. "We were attacked by the bloodline users." Takane bent his head down as he coughed up some blood, mentally applauding himself for his good performance. "How did you escape?" asked the commander, who was looking at him in suspicion. "I managed to fall into our river." Naruto's head began to bob. "Guess they thought I was dead." Letting his eyes close, Takane feigned unconscious as the commander looked him over for a moment. "Get this man to medical. I want him up and about to give a report by tomorrow," the commander ordered as the one who was carrying him and someone else came up on his other side and grabbed his other arm. As they dragged him through the base they did not notice the small smile on Takane's face. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. "Alright, ease in," Ao said as he observed the front gates come to a close. "Now we just need to wait for him to open the gates and we'll begin our mission." This would be one of the first times they actually destroyed an enemy base. They had done many raids on ninja teams and caravans before. But because they lacked the numbers they had never been able to storm one of the strongholds the Mizukage Yagura created, mainly because no one could sneak in to disrupt it from the inside. Henge did not work on the more talented of Jonin, and Yagura had created these bases to be impenetrable from the outside. There were a total of 15 guard towers that were designed to spot enemy ambushes long before they ever got within 100 meters of the place. The walls were sturdy enough that only Terumi-sama could break them with her Yoden Jutsu, meaning someone had to open it from the inside. So upon learning that Naruto could create a solid physical transformation, their leader had immediately made plans to begin infiltrating and destroying enemy bases. They had gotten what intelligence they could, finding out where one of the bases was through capturing a few ninja who were working with bandits and interrogating them. Naruto would shinsei henge into one of the men and come to the base, injured, and claim they were attacked. Once he was inside, the boy would need to kill and replace the men on the guard towers near the entrance and open the gate to allow their team through. They would then proceed to capture the commander and take him back to base where he could be thoroughly interrogated. However, this was also a two-point mission for Ao, who was mainly here for the purpose of finding out how skilled the young man who had come here was. Depending on how talented he was, they would be able to make even bolder plans and hopefully end this war faster. Outside, while he trusted Terumi-sama with his life, he was not sure what she was thinking, making plans that hung on the abilities of a kid. Back in his day, people relied on the abilities of senior ninja and entire ninja squads, not young upstarts. "What should we do if the boy fails?" asked one of his men. "Then we leave. No point in attacking if it will lead to failure," replied Ao. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto opened his eyes the moment the door closed. Sitting up in his bed, he looked around. He was obviously in a medical room, if the wounded people in beds were any indication. They had gotten rid of his clothes and given him a standard patient's garb, basically just a white smock. Naruto looked around to make sure none of the other patients were awake before getting up. Dispelling his henge, Naruto's true form came up. Putting the cloak over his head, he was just about to make his way to the door, only for it to open. Acting on pure instinct, Naruto drew a kunai, and the minute the person walked through the door, he appeared right in front of them, thrusting the kunai into the person's neck and inflicting a fatal wound. Before they could hit the ground, Naruto caught the person so they would not make any noise. Only now did he take a look at who it was. The person, a woman, was still alive as she looked at him with wide pained eyes while her hands went up to her throat. Naruto watched in horror as within seconds the woman shuddered and died, her eyes still open. Naruto's face paled as he recognized the person as a doctor. He picked her up and closed the door behind him as quietly as possible so as not to wake the patients. He walked over to his bed and gently set her down, arranging her form so she looked to be sleeping. This was his first kill, or at least the first one in cold blood. He didn't count the man who was raping the woman, as he refused to see such monsters as people. While he had killed before during his trip with Ero Sennin, it had been in self-defense. This time he had killed someone simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Worse still, he killed a doctor, someone who has devoted their life to healing others. He felt sick to his stomach as he clenched his eyes shut, taking several calming breaths as a few small tears fell out of the corners of his eyes. Reopening them, he shut the woman's eyes and lightly touched her forehead with his own, saying a quick prayer and apology before he left. He still had a mission to do and couldn't afford to be distracted. He could break down later. Placing his sensei's invisibility jutsu over himself, Naruto left the room after making sure the door was locked from the inside and then closing it. He made his way down the hallway of the base, which he knew from the general observations they had taken beforehand that the base had 2 stories. He was on the first and would need to reach the second to get to the guard towers, which were connected to the main building. Naruto jumped onto the ceiling, channeling a small amount of chakra to his feet as several people walked past. Deciding the ceiling was safer anyway, he continued moving on, crawling along the roof as he made his way up the stairs. Once he was on the second floor, he dropped back down and continued on the floor, dodging areas that were heavily populated with shinobi. Finding a secluded spot, the blonde opened a window and climbed out, before closing it so nothing would seem amiss should someone come by. Looking over, Naruto found he was right next to one of the towers, though he didn't know which one. Moving along the side of the wall, he made his way towards this tower. As he got closer, he looked at the ground floor and realized with relief that he was next to the gate entrance. Moving into the small tower, Naruto walked behind the two people who were looking out at the grounds around the outside of the base. Pulling out two kunai, Naruto steeled himself for what he was about to do. A flash of steel later, and Naruto was gently setting down two dead ninja after he had pierced them through the temple. He rolled them over and memorized their features before creating two cage bushin who hanged into the ninja he had killed. Looking at the other two towers next to him, he noticed they were still looking out at the grounds, meaning he hadn't been seen. He sighed in relief before moving over to the second guard tower and repeating the process. With that over, Naruto climbed over the wall and walked down onto the ground. Sneaking over to the gate, Naruto spotted the two who were standing guard on each side. Using the two kunai he had been working with to make his kills, Naruto took aim and threw them. Both kunai pierced the back of the two ninjas' heads. Before they could hit the ground, Naruto created a cage bushin. Both the Narutos appeared next to the dead shinobi and caught them while they were falling. Hiding them off to the side, Naruto looked at the winch designed to close and open the gate. Pushing it up, the wheels began to turn as the gate opened. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Outside of the base, Ao and the others had been waiting for something to happen. When doing a stakeout of any kind, it is usually boring and only penetrated with excitement when and if something actually happened. Ninja who specialize in reconnaissance learn this early on. Only those who are patient and collected can truly do stakeouts. Especially of this nature, where you are going to be infiltrating and destroying an enemy base should the one you sent to open the way come through. Taicho, the gate is opening, one of his men informed Ao. I can see that, Ao said. While he did not show it, he was impressed with the short amount of time it took for this boy to accomplish his mission. It looks like he came through after all. Alright, men were moving out. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto took a long chug out of his sake bottle, letting the liquid burn down his throat. Setting the bottle down, he closed his eyes as he took in several deep breaths, trying to settle his after-mission nerves. This had been one of his first missions above C rank. He didn't really count the wave mission since it had originally been C rank and Kakashi and Sasuke had done most of the fighting. The only other mission that had been above C was his mission to Yuki, and he had not killed anyone then. Despite that the mission had gone off without a hitch, he had given a nearly impeccable performance after the mission. Ao's team, which was the one he would be assigned to unless needed elsewhere, had even given a toast to him when they got back. Yet even with all the praise he was getting, his thoughts kept going back to the woman he had killed at the start of the mission. Try as he might, he could not keep his mind off of the final look of pain and fear that had seen in her eyes as she died, which of course was why he was here. He had been unable to sleep and so had come to the small bar the base had to hopefully drink himself stupid. Unfortunately, he was having no such luck as Kyuubi just burned the alcohol out of his system. As he was cursing the fox for all he was worth, a voice spoke up behind him. Yen, for your thoughts. Naruto turned around and came face to face with Mei. He gave her a somewhat pained smile and gestured for her to take a seat. Moving up to the stool, she sat down next to him and shared a companionable silence. Naruto collected his thoughts before he began to speak. I killed today. He looked over at Mei to find her looking at him with a raised eyebrow, finding it odd that a shinobi would be bothered by this. Still, he was young, so maybe it was his first. Normally this wouldn't be a problem. I've killed before, usually in self-defense or the few times me and Ero-sensei ran into bandit camps. Well, there went that idea. Wait, Ero-sensei? Mei asked with an amused smile. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as a sheepish expression passed over his face. Sorry, I meant my sensei, Jiraiya. Mei's eyes actually widened in shock. You mean the Jiraiya of the legendary 3? At Naruto's nod, Mei turned to her own thoughts. When she had first heard that Konoha was only going to be sending one person to help them, Mei had been, while not displeased as she had not expected much, had at the very least found herself feeling disappointed. However, the handsome young man before her seemed to have quite a bit of skill, as he demonstrated with pulling off a successful infiltration mission, allowing them to destroy one of their enemy's strongholds for the first time. They had even managed to capture the commander of the base. He had provided her with the location of even more bases which she was planning on having the young blonde infiltrate. She could now see why he was so skilled. If he was trained by Jiraiya. She looked over at the blonde to see him looking at her quizzically and became somewhat embarrassed at spacing out. "I'm sorry, please continue." Naruto smiled appreciatively. He did not know why, but he felt comfortable in her presence, as if he could trust her. Naruto went back to his story. "It had been at the start of the mission and I had just been about to sneak out of the medical room when the door opened. I can't really remember much except for instincts kicking in. One moment I'm just getting off the bed and the next there's a young woman in my arms clawing at her throat." "You looked in her eyes, didn't you?" May asked as an understanding light came to her. In the academy they had been taught that the worst possible thing you could do was stare into the eyes of someone you had killed. It had caused many problems for young genin who became plagued with nightmares about their first kills, many of which had to quit being a shinobi because they had become mentally unstable. It had been why the original graduation exam in Kiri had been to kill the person closest to you. They felt that if you could do that, then killing some random person would be nothing. Naruto nodded. Yes, I had looked into her eyes and watched her die, saw the helpless and pained expression on her face. Naruto quickly wiped away a stray tear, hoping May wouldn't notice. She had but decided to just file it away for later. "But that's not even the worst of it. I killed a doctor, someone whose purpose in life was to heal others. While they do have some minor combat training, they never take a life unless they have to. People like us," he gestured to himself and May, "were killers. Our whole purpose revolves around causing more death than our enemy." Naruto paused. "I've never really liked killing. In truth, when I first thought about what I wanted to be, my first choice was a doctor." "Why didn't you become one?" May asked in curiosity. A doctor was on the complete opposite end of the career spectrum. "Honestly," Naruto sighed, "I have no idea why, or even when I had changed my mind. Wouldn't have mattered anyway. From the moment I was born I was chosen to be a ninja by factors outside of my life. Both of my parents were ninja, extremely powerful in their own right. That was part of the truth. But the biggest reason was because of Kyuubi. Even if he had been given a choice, there was no other profession he could have chosen because of that rather small detail." "So, you became a ninja because of your parents?" May asked. "Partially." Naruto looked at her. "I actually didn't even know who my parents were until a few months ago. But the Sandaime knew them. He would always tell me great stories about how my parents were such noble people who fought to protect their home. Of course, I had no clue he was talking about them at the time." "Sounds like he manipulated you." May scowled. She had never liked people who would manipulate an innocent child. It sounded like something Yagura would do so he could get a powerful pawn under his sway. "Yes, I'm pretty sure that whether he knew it or not, he was indeed manipulating me to become a shinobi. Though I would never blame him for that. He was the Hokage after all, so I assume he was mainly telling me of his own feelings." Naruto took another swig of sake. "I'm not well liked in my village, so this was really the only option I had available anyway." Naruto blinked in surprise. Why did he just tell her that? This was only the second time he had even talked with her. It's not like they were close or anything. He couldn't blame it on the sake since he was unable to get inebriated. Perhaps it was the aura she gave off. Maybe her comforting presence. Or perhaps it was some other factor he had yet to deduce. He looked over at May, who seemed to be interested in that comment. Deciding there was no harm in letting her know a little more, he started again. "Because of events that happened at my birth, events that I had no control over, I have been hated all my life." May frowned at that. "Were your parents traitors?" That was the only thing she could think of that would make the people of his village hate him. Though she did not think that was the case, especially if the Sandaime had hailed them as much as Naruto said he had. Of course he could have told Naruto that so he could manipulate him into becoming a shinobi. Naruto shook his head. No, in fact, my parents, or at least one of my parents, is considered the greatest hero the Hidden Leaf Village has ever seen. Mei looked at the young man in thought. There were very few heroes within Konoha during the time Naruto could have been born. At least ones who were not too old or too young to be his parents. She looked at him closely, studying his profile as if she was trying to put together the pieces to a puzzle. Now that she thought about it, he did remind her of someone she had seen in a textbook on the Third Great Ninja War. The man who had been hailed as the one to end that war with a single jutsu that had become so feared she doubted even Yagura would have fought him. An image came to her mind and a name clicked. She felt her eyes widened as she finally realized who his parents were, or rather who his father was. I see you figured it out, Naruto said as he saw the recognition in her eyes. I would appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone of my parentage, at least not yet. I can do that, Mei said after a bit of thought. He was, after all, he was trusting her with what had to be a fairly large secret. She knew it would cause a lot of problems not just for him but for her as well if word about Naruto's heritage got out. No doubt Iwa would be more than willing to join in the bloodline wars if they thought they could kill the son of the Kuroi Senku. Thanks, Naruto said with a small smile. Mei returned it as she looked at him. So why don't you continue your story? There's really nothing more to tell, Naruto said with a sigh. I killed someone who I feel didn't deserve to die. Sure, she may have been the enemy, but people who can heal are some of the only people I really respect. It takes little effort to kill, however to heal takes a lot of work, time, effort and sweat. I think I understand, Mei said, and in truth she did. While Mei did not quite have Naruto's perspective, she could understand his thoughts and feelings on this kind of subject. Still, don't you feel better knowing that the people you care about are safe because you're fighting? Naruto chuckled. That's the only reason I'm still a shinobi. If I didn't have my precious people to protect, there would be no way I would still be in this business. Mei smiled at the man who was quickly becoming something of an enigma to her. From just the little conversations she had had with him since he came here, she found herself intrigued. His apparent desire to protect the he cared for just made her want to figure him out all the more. So you fight to protect your precious people then? Naruto nodded absently as he took a drink of sake, only to be disappointed when he realized it was all gone. Then I suppose since you're here, does that make me precious to you? Naruto looked over at Mei in surprise before he saw her slightly pouty expression. Naruto grinned as he tapped a finger to his chin. Well, he looked at her with a critical eye before leaning over and wrapping an arm around her waist. I suppose so, that is if you make me one of your precious people, he finished in a husky whisper. Mei shivered from his tone as a small blush spread across her delicate features, but she managed to keep her grin in place as she looked at him for a second before standing up. I guess I could make you one of my precious people, Mei said using Naruto's term as she winked at him. Provided you escort me to my room. Naruto laughed as he stood up and stuck his arm out for Mei to take. I can do that, though some of your men might get jealous to see you cuddling up to the new guy. Well then I suppose they will stay jealous, won't they? Mei asked rhetorically as they left the bar. I hope you're not intimidated by any of my admirers. Me intimidated? Naruto scoffed. Don't make me laugh. I was just worried that they may end up in the hospital for trying to put me in my place. Mei giggled before they continued to walk down the hall, a companionable silence coming between the two. True to Naruto's prediction, he did draw several angry glares from almost all of the men who were also in the hall, no doubt wondering how the new guy was so close to their leader when he had only been here for a few days. What Naruto had not expected was some of the women who actually glared at Mei. Naruto had not been here long enough to be really known, and he had not met any of these women even in passing. He wondered if they simply thought she was degrading herself by getting so close to someone after only a few days of their first meeting. It's because they're jealous. Huh? Naruto asked in a somewhat dumb tone as he turned to look at Mei. Mei covered her mouth with her free hand as she giggled. Word of how you rescued a woman from being raped apparently spread through the base soon after you arrived. It seems that your good deed made you quite popular. But they don't even know me. Naruto said, blinking before realizing what was going on. I can't believe, I didn't think I would see fangirls in the middle of a war. This comment caused Mei to laugh outright, causing the people around the two to become startled. Mei's laugh calmed down and became an occasional small giggle. Well, to be honest, I didn't expect it either, but there you have it, she said as she made a casual gesture to a few of the girls around her. I suppose so, Naruto said as they once again continued in silence. A few moments later they were at Mei's door. Mei turned around and gave him an alluring smile. Thank you for escorting me, kind sir. Naruto grinned at her as he gave an exaggerated bow. Not at all, my lady. It has been a pleasure to merely find myself so graced as to be in the presence of a goddess such as you. Charmer, Mei murmured, unable to contain a blush from the comment. I am so such thing. Naruto affected mock surprised look. I am merely someone who speaks what I think. Naruto took her hand and gave it a small kiss. Looking up, he was pleased to see Mei's face was now red. He gave her one last smile. I'll see you later, Mei-chan. Mei's blush increased in hue at the addition of the affectionate suffix Naruto added to her name. Mei-chan, I could get used to being called that. She looked at where Naruto was going down the corridor. Naruto Namikaze, you truly are an enigma I will enjoy figuring out. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto looked around at the other people who had also been called to Mei's office. Two of them he didn't know. They were not frontline soldiers, so he had never fought by their side. All he knew was that one of them was the head of the medical staff and the other managed the supplies they acquired through various means. He also knew that the one who managed the supplies did not like him for some reason. The man was fairly young, so Naruto assumed it was because of how close he was to Mei. The man had complained once about Mei insisting on having Naruto with them as a part of their meetings. He never did it again after Mei threatened to melt his balls of, which Naruto had later found out she could quite literally do. Ao was also with them. He and the hunter Nin had gotten closer in the past 5 months Naruto had been here. During that time Naruto had usually been with Ao's team and had gone on several more infiltrate and destroy missions. There was also Chojuro, a shy young man with blue hair, black eyes and sharp shark-like teeth. A trait he shared with Zabuza and Kisame. He wore black-rimmed glasses that were connected to a set of headphones. He was wearing a blue striped shirt with camouflage pants, while his Hidia 8 was worn across his chest. He carried a large sword on his back called Hiramakare, which was wrapped in bandages much like Kisame did with his sword. Naruto had met and teamed up with him during one of his missions. They got along well enough. Naruto had found out that despite being a member of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Nananshu, Chojuro was extremely shy and underconfident. Though he had noticed the man seemed to find the courage to glare at him whenever Mei was on Naruto's arm and flirting with him. Naruto looked back at Mei, who had an apprehensive look on her face. Naruto was not sure why this meeting had been called since they met every week on Wednesdays to hear reports and plan. All Naruto knew was that it was apparently important, most likely new intel that could spell trouble for the rebels. As you all know, we have recently dealt several harsh blows to the Mizukage's forces. Mei started catching the attention of the people in the room. That was true enough. In the past 5 months they had managed to destroy 10 enemy strongholds, cutting off valuable trade routes and isolating enemy forces, allowing the Bloodline side to pick them off. After that first mission Naruto had been on, they had continued to use the infiltration tactic with great success. While Naruto would not claim credit for being the reason their missions were so successful, he was glad to know that he was helping bring this violent war to a close. However, it seems that with our success Yagura has decided that we have become a serious threat. I have received intel that he has amassed his forces and they will be heading towards our base at 1 month's time to destroy us. The two who had no part in the fighting paled at her words and began to mumble to themselves. A glare from Mei quickly shut them up. Because of this I am planning an evacuation of the base. We are lucky that we were able to get this information fast enough so that we can evacuate the base without costing lives. So we're going to have to run asked Ao with a small grumble. Back in my day when we had to face such engagements we. Ao, Mei interrupted with a sickly sweet voice as one of her perfectly shaped eyebrows twitched. Shut up, or I'll kill you. Ao paled. I didn't mean to imply that. Naruto gave a silent laugh as he listened to the small banter. Naruto had realized a while ago that this was a common occurrence between the two. Mei tended to get a particularly bad attitude when Ao would start talking, mainly because he would somehow end up making a comment that could easily be taken as a talk about marriage. Mei had confided in Naruto privately that she was somewhat depressed that she was going to reach her 30s in a few years and had yet to find a husband. Naruto had merely laughed and told her that a woman as beautiful as her shouldn't worry about such things since she would no doubt have men flocking to her as soon as the war was over. This had led to a little word play between the two that had begun to happen more often these days, especially when it was just the two of them. Naruto had grown much closer to the busty redhead. He would not deny that he was quite possibly starting to fall for her. She was smart, strong, intelligent, beautiful and seemed to have the same love of flirty wordplay that he had. While Naruto would deny it vehemently to anyone who commented on it, traveling with Jiraiya had slightly tainted him. While Naruto would never peep on a woman like Ero-sensei did, he always took great joy in making a woman blush either with a subtle or not so subtle compliment on her looks or making a comment laced with innuendo. Seeing a beautiful woman who seemed to enjoy the same thing he did was not only welcome since it kept things fun, but also because their talks kept Naruto from having nightmares about the things he had done and seen in this war. Mei-chan, Naruto said, getting her attention as well as several glares from the others at calling Mei by such a in their eyes, disrespectful suffix. Yes, Naruto-kun, Mei asked, not caring to look at the shocked and jealous looks the two received. Honestly, she had figured these people would have been used to it by now. I don't think there is any need to evacuate. In fact, this could be where we end the war. Naruto's statement caused several shocked looks all around. It was extremely bold to claim that they could end the war right now. Despite numerous recent victories and cutting down about 1/3 of Yagura's forces, they were still outnumbered 3-1. That's a bold claim to make, Naruto, Mei said, dropping the suffix as she adopted a completely serious tone. I assume you have a plan. Naruto simply reached into his cloak's inner pocket and set down a large tri-pronged kunai on the table. While the people around him were wondering what the odd kunai was, Mei's eyes widened. You mean? Yes, Naruto said in a firm voice, it's time the world was reintroduced to the Flash. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto stared out across the plain trying to see if the enemy had arrived. Like always in Mizu no Kuni, the area was extremely misty, giving everyone very low visibility. Looking to his right and left, Naruto saw several people who were lining up kunai launchers. If he were to look behind him, he knew that he would see people doing the same thing. He noticed that most of the people who were preparing them were looking at the odd tri-pronged kunai in curiosity, most likely wondering what it was and how it could be used to end the war. Naruto and Mei had refused to say anything, and the only person who the blonde was sure knew what was going to happen was Ao, who was more knowledgeable than most people from Mizu due to his travels. Because of how isolated Mizu no Kuni was, most people who lived there did not have much information about the world outside their country. All these people knew was that their job was to launch the kunai. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Naruto smiled as he closed his eyes. He had known she was there for a while now, having gotten used to her presence. He let himself find comfort in her presence a little longer before answering, yes, this war has gone on long enough. Naruto turned around to face the busty redhead and gave her a smile. It would be selfish of me to not use one of my abilities just so my secret can remain secret. Mei gave Naruto a smile. Despite the war he had been through, Naruto still maintained a strong sense of right and wrong. She did not know when it happened, but sometime along the line Naruto had made it his personal goal to end the bloodshed in Kiri. Perhaps it had always been there and that was why she had not seen it. Maybe when he first came here and saw how bad life was here that he decided to help. She couldn't be sure, and if she were honest with herself, she didn't care. Just knowing that this young man who had quite literally turned the tide in the war was with her was enough. Thank you, she said in a voice so low that even Naruto's enhanced hearing almost caused him to miss it. Naruto tilted her head up to his. In the last few months Naruto had hit a growth spurt and was now at a height of 5 feet 9 inches, about a head taller than Mei. You don't need to thank me. Even if Konoha told me to return right now, I would stay and help you finish this. Mei's small smile turned into a sultry grin as she closed the distance between them. Such heroic nature deserves a suitable reward, don't you think? She began to draw circles on his clothing, which was missing the typical hooded cloak he usually wore while on missions, allowing Mei to feel the rock-hard muscles the young man was packing. Naruto smirked, opting to be more bold than usual as he put an arm around her waist and pulled her into a one-armed embrace, making the two of them meld together. If you insist, Naruto said, turning his voice into a husky growl. I remember reading that Mizu had some nice hot springs. Perhaps the two of us can see if that's still true. My, aren't you bold, Naruto-kun? Mei said, holding a hand to her face to hide the blush that had spread to her cheeks. I can't believe this. We're going into battle and you are making banter with each other. Both Naruto and Mei turned to Ao with deadpan expression. Why, back in my day when we were going to fight we would. Ow, the two said in eerie unison. There was an odd shadow covering their faces, making it so that Ao could not see their eyes. Shut up, or we'll kill you. Ao instantly paled and, despite considering himself brave, took a step back. Having Terumi-sama threaten him was bad enough, but adding Naruto as well, the old hunter ninja felt a shiver of fear run down his spine. Well, I just wanted to tell you that the ETA for the enemy is 30 minutes and I'll just leave you two now. Thank you. You may go back to your post, Mei said, adopting her leader voice. Ao quickly bowed and walked away, hoping he could make it as far away from those two as possible and hopefully not see them until the end of this battle. Mei turned back to Naruto. Are you ready? Naruto nodded. Yes. Mei nodded before looking at the ground for a second. Nodding her head as if she were coming to an important decision, Mei looked back at Naruto. Leaning on her toes, she gave him a small kiss on the cheek, leaving a light blue imprint of her lipstick on him. Naruto's eyes widened for a second as he brought up a hand to his cheek. This time he was the one who found himself becoming red, which only made the blue lip imprint Mei left stand out more. That was for luck, Mei told him with a heartfelt smile, and to make sure you come back. Naruto's face slowly turned back to its natural tan color as he grinned. Do I get another if I make it back alive? Mei struck up a thinking pose. If you make it back alive, I'll give you something even better. Perhaps that trip to the hot spring you wanted. Deciding to leave their conversation on a light note, Mei gave him a wink and walked off. Naruto turned back to look at the preparations with a large grin on his face. Despite knowing he was going to be forced to kill today, that kiss had made his day. He channeled some chakra to his eyes to give himself some slightly enhanced vision in the hopes of clearing the thick mist. He sighed when he couldn't pierce through the mist, meaning it would be a waiting game until they came within range of his vision. He took slow breaths as he remained calm. In all honesty, had no clue if he could pull this off. This would be the first time he used the Hiraishin in battle, but he had spent several days getting used to the feel of using the space-time jutsu. So with some luck or perhaps Kami on their side, he would hopefully be able to pull it off and defeat the enemies that were now coming for the Bloodline rebels. It was about 10 minutes later that he saw the first troops trying to race across the field as quickly as possible. For a shinobi, open war combat was the most dangerous kind. Unlike samurai who rely on their swords and charging the enemies head first into battle, ninja used large-scale ninjutsu and other powerful techniques and weapons like explosive notes that were designed to take out a large amount of enemies at once. This meant that combat in any kind of open space was extremely dangerous. On the few occasions that moving in an open field couldn't be helped, it was always the best option to try to cross it as fast as possible. It would do little good here. Enemy forces are approaching. Ready the kunai. Naruto yelled out his order. The people around Naruto instantly obeyed without question or hesitation. While he was not their leader and technically not even a member of their forces, they felt inclined to listen to him. During the 6 months of constant war, Naruto had gained a charismatic presence that added to his ability to make people listen to and believe in him. Once the kunai were ready, Naruto gave the signal. Fire! XXXXXXXXXXXXX. To many of the shinobi it had happened too fast for them to follow. 1 minute they were running across the flat clearing to move closer to the enemy base so they could start launching their attack before the bloodline rebels had a chance to respond. The next minute they were forced to dodge and block a literal hail of kunai that began raining down on them. While this was not hard since the kunai were only in the hundreds and were spaced apart by about 15 meters, it had forced them to halt in their advance. When the kunai stopped coming, many of the ninja paused to pick one up to see what it was. None of them had ever seen a kunai of this kind before. That was when it happened. A bright yellow flash began appearing in several places so quick that it seemed as if the flashes were happening at the same time. Each time the flash disappeared, anywhere from 10 to 20 ninja would drop, before it disappeared again and began attacking another area. The enemy had no idea what was happening, nor any time to comprehend their untimely defeat as their forces were picked apart piecemeal. Naruto flashed in front of a man who had grabbed one of the kunai, launching a Rasengan into the man's stomach. Naruto grabbed the kunai and put it in his pouch before he flashed again. Flashing behind a woman, he gave her a chop to the back of the neck, before moving on to another man and smashing a fist in his face hard enough to send the man flying. Said man was unconscious before he hit the ground. Each time Naruto flashed, he made sure to grab the kunai while simultaneously knocking out or killing the enemy. No sense in letting others grab them since they would not be able to use it anyway. Naruto found the experience of flashing from place to place using the Hiraishin to be somewhat disorienting. No one but Minato and now Naruto truly knew how the jutsu worked or what it did. When in what Naruto was beginning to call the flash, it slowed down one's perception of time, allowing them to make decisions in mere milliseconds, making it an extremely powerful technique. Not only that, but he was able to keep track of everything that was happening within a 15-meter radius from the kunai due to the sensor arrays in the shiki, allowing him to flash anywhere within that range and take out his opponents. However, it also had its drawbacks. The jutsu took a toll on the body as it was not meant to do this, as well as the information from the kunai that could overload his mind if he was not careful. The strain, especially for first-time users, were incredible. Ero-sensei had told Naruto that the first time his father had used the Hiraishin, the man had passed out mere minutes afterwards. Up in the area where Mei and the other shinobi who were waiting could not help but watch in a mixture of fear and awe as one man destroyed an entire army. To them it seemed as if the entire field was covered in giant yellow flashes of light as Naruto teleported from point to point, taking people out left and right. In truth, the entire thing lasted only a few minutes at the most. Nearly the entire Mizukage force was either dead or merely unconscious. However, there was still one man who was not out of the fight yet. It was the man Naruto had been hoping to get first, if he were honest. He had of course tried, but the man had formed his Biju shroud, making kunai, swords and even the standard Rasengan useless. As the rest of the enemies were felled, the flash disappeared and in its place was a somewhat heavily breathing Naruto, who was currently standing across the chakra-covered Yagura. Who would have thought that I would have been able to witness that jutsu firsthand? Yagura mused absently as he looked at Naruto, who merely glared at the man. I presume you are the thorn in my side that appeared a few months back, yes? Again Naruto said nothing, causing Yagura to sigh. A pity that you won't talk. I don't talk to people who take joy in killing others, Naruto stated with a fierce glare. Take joy? Yagura said, actually sounding surprised. I take no joy in causing death, boy. But to preserve the pure blood of humans I must extinguish those whose blood has become tainted. Naruto scowled as he got into his fight stance. Considering that bloodlines were said to come from the Biju, I find it funny that you, of all people, are talking about purity. Enough talk. Yagura glared as the comment Naruto made apparently got to him. I am going to enjoy shutting that mouth of yours up permanently. You're welcome to try. The two disappeared in a blur and a resounding crash rang throughout the clearing. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Mei felt her eyes widen as she watched the new battle that was starting to take place. Just as it seemed like Naruto had literally won the war for them, a new threat popped up, and in the worst possible form. The intelligence had received had not mentioned anything about Yagura actually coming to the battlefield himself, though in hindsight she supposed it made sense if most of his forces were going into battle. Now Naruto was fighting a cage-level ninja who was also a Jinchuriki, said to have full control over his Biju. Things were not looking good right now. Ow! Mei called out, getting the man to her side immediately. I want you to gather your forces and have them see who among the battlefield are alive. Knowing Naruto, most of them are probably just unconscious. Take them prisoners so we can sort out who the criminals are later. Ao bowed. Of course, Terumi-sama. If I may ask, where will you be? I'm going to help Naruto, Mei replied as she began running towards the battle that was now taking place. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto grunted as he took a hit that felt like it shattered his entire rib cage. He had in all honesty never felt someone hit that hard. Of course he had only ever fought one other Jinchuriki before, but all Gaara had been able to do was turn into a giant tanuki. Naruto flipped on his feet and began going through several hand signs. Raiden. Gion. Lightning release. False darkness. A large blast of lightning shot out of Naruto's mouth and tore through the landscape as it headed for Yagura. The attack hit dead on and Naruto waited for the dust to clear before making his next move. When it did, Naruto cursed at not even seeing a scratch on the man. Apparently when one had full control over their Biju as displayed here, it came with some serious advantages. Yagura came at Naruto again, getting in front of him faster than most people could blink and aiming a punch with enough power that it would take off the blonde's head. Fortunately Naruto had trained extensively to fight at high speeds and dodged the blow, tilting his head to the side as he crouched down. A Rasengan appeared in both his hands before he shoved them into the Mizukage's stomach and chest. It seemed to have an effect as Naruto was able to put more chakra into it than when he used the Hiraishin. A scream tore itself through the cloaked Sanbi Jinchuriki's throat as his stomach and chest muscles were partly torn away before he was sent flying. The man managed to flip onto his feet and looked up at Naruto with a snarl. Naruto grimaced at seeing the man's muscles and flesh almost finished healing. He wondered if this was what it felt like for others when he just healed any injury he received. Oh, I can just tell. This is going to be fun. The three tails that waved themselves behind Yagura suddenly came up to the front as the man opened his mouth, large amounts of concentrated chakra forming between the tails. Naruto was curious for a moment, wondering what Yagura was doing. That amount of demonic chakra would kill anyone, even him. The Mizukage swallowed the condensed matter of chakra, becoming extremely heavy and causing the earth he was standing on to shatter. Sanbaiko Amari. Three tails menacing ball. Quote exclamation mark quote. Naruto swore as a large blast of pure energy was launched at him. Naruto threw one of the Hiraishin kunai he had been sure to gather as he fought. Just as the attack was about to hit, Naruto flashed out of the way, catching the kunai before he landed on the ground. Naruto looked to where he had been. The attack had been and saw that it had torn a 50-foot diameter trench through the spot, and it looked like it continued on for miles. Naruto was glad that he had been on the opposite side of the rebels, or they would have been annihilated. I'm beginning to hate that jutsu. Naruto turned to see Yagura glaring at him. Not deigning to speak, Naruto got into his fighting stance again. Yagura chuckled before coming at him full force. Channeling Kyuubi's chakra into his fist, Naruto began to meet the man blow for blow as the fight continued. Unfortunately, Yagura could use more tails than Naruto, who could only use one, and the punches were beginning to hurt. However, there was really not that much that Naruto could do. Jutsu were for the most part useless. The only thing that worked was the Rasengan, and Naruto, while not having used a lot of chakra, would not be able to make many more. The strain of using the Hiraishin so much today without being well trained in it had taken a large toll on his body. Naruto ducked under a swipe sent his way, before being forced to twist himself out of the path of one of the man's tails. As Yagura sent another punch at the blonde, Naruto sidestepped the attack while grabbing the arm and pulling him into a knee. It didn't seem to do anything as the man just got back up and began attacking him even more furiously. Naruto dodged another punch, only to have his feet swept out from under him. The blonde managed to roll to the left just in time to dodge another blow from Yagura that shattered the earth. Pushing himself onto his feet, Naruto shot off towards his opponent, appearing in front of Yagura before sending another, larger Rasengan at the man. Udoma Rasengan. Big Ball Rasengan. There was a large explosion and Yagura was sent flying back, rolling to the ground a few times before coming to a stop. Naruto was hunched over panting as the man got up again. He noticed that the wounds while still healing were more extensive. Naruto cursed. He needed to use a stronger jutsu. If only he had some way to distract his Jinchuriki opponent, he may be able to use that jutsu. Yoden. Lava Bullet. Several bullets of molten magma shot at Yagura, impacting and making him stumble forward as he screamed out in pain from the lava melting the skin off his back. Naruto looked over to see Mei Terumi running towards him with a worried yet determined expression. Unfortunately, the blonde also noticed Yagura's eyes catch onto Mei's form. Both Naruto and Yagura disappeared. Mei suddenly found herself being thrown to the side as Naruto pushed her away from Yagura. Ducking under a punch, Naruto shoved another Rasengan at his opponent, wincing as his arms felt the strain of the attack as it drilled into his opponent's ribs. As Yagura was thrown away, Naruto ran towards Mei. "Are you alright?" he asked as he offered her a hand. "I think I should be the one asking that," Mei said as she accepted the help up. "I hope you have a plan for beating him because I'm drawing a blank." "Maybe," Naruto breathed. "How long can you hold him off for?" 10 minutes at the most, Mei said, looking to where Yagura was getting back up. "That should be more than enough time," Naruto said. "Be careful when you fight him." "I will," Mei said as she charged towards Yagura and began doing hand seals. Footen. Skilled Mist. Boil Release Skilled Mist. As Mei began to launch Yoden and Footen Jutsu at Yagura, making sure to keep her distance, Naruto created a clone. Holding out his hand, Naruto formed a Rasengan. The clone began to channel wind chakra into the spinning maelstrom of destruction. "I'm only going to have one shot at this, I need to make it count." The Rasengan began to turn pure white as 4 points appeared swirling around its outer edge, making the jutsu look like a 4-point shuriken. A loud screeching sound began to fill the air as the jutsu became complete. He looked over at Mei, who had several bruises but for the most part looked okay. "Mei, get out of the way." Mei jumped away from Yagura as Naruto channeled a concentrated dose of chakra to his feet, shooting off with such force that the landscape literally buckled and cracked when Naruto kicked off. Speeding towards Yagura, Naruto thrust out his hand. Futen. Rasenshuriken. Wind Release. Spiral Ball Shuriken. Yagura had no time to react as the jutsu hit him head-on, tearing through the Biju cloak like it was mere paper as he was lifted into the air. A large dome 80 feet in diameter appeared around him as millions upon millions of wind blades sliced into the Jinchuriki at the cellular level. Had the dome not blocked out sound, Naruto and Mei were sure they would have heard screaming, seeing as Yagura's mouth was open in a silent yell. Finally, the dome vanished and Yagura's body fell to the ground. A second later, there was a large burst of light as the chakra from the Biju escaped. At first, Naruto was worried. He did not have the energy to fight anymore and he doubted that Mei could stand up to a Biju. Luck seemed to be with them as the Biju did not have the energy to reform and dispersed, most likely heading to another location where it could regain its strength. Naruto closed his eyes as he fell to the ground, breathing heavily as sweat began to pour down his features. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, he could really feel the strain that using the Hiraishin had taken on his body, as well as an intense pain in his arm. He looked at his arm and grimaced. It had thousands of tiny cuts on it, much like what Yagura had, albeit on a smaller scale. They were already beginning to heal as Kyuubi chakra went to work. Still, the jutsu hurt like a bitch to use and he had hoped that he would not need it again until he found a way to throw it. He opened his eyes when he felt his head being lifted up and put on something soft. What he saw was Mei smiling at him as she began to stroke his hair. "Are you alright?" Naruto asked. "Shouldn't I be asking that?" She questioned as she looked him up and down. His clothes were completely ripped, leaving him with his pants, which were now shorts, and his combat boots. You look like shit. Naruto chuckled. Oh good, then it's not just my imagination because I feel like shit. Is everyone safe? Yes, she said. Many of the people were actually walking over to them after having witnessed the battle. Looks like you're a hero, huh? Naruto tried to laugh only to wince as he felt his chest strain under the pressure. I suppose, well, I think I'm gonna have to take a rain check on that reward. Good night. With that, the blonde shinobi closed his eyes as the last bit of adrenaline left his body and he fell asleep. May looked at him for a good while as she continued to absently run a hand through his hair. She looked over at the battle site and shook her head. The battlefield was a site of absolute destruction, the techniques used having literally reformed the landscape. She looked over at the large crater Naruto's jutsu created. She had never seen such a destructive technique. Even her Yoden attacks didn't do that much damage. Looking back at Naruto, she smiled. Enigma indeed. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. It had been 6 months after the battle and things had been running smoothly in Mist. May had been selected as the new Mizukage and immediately began putting plans up to rebuild Kiri and the neighboring cities. With the help of many of the ninja, both those who had been on the bloodline side and the ones who had been against Yagura but could not leave for fear of their families, had begun to help with the repairs. With the two factions now working under one banner and with the support of the Mizu daimyo, Kiri was beginning to get underway to returning to its former glory. Of course, it also helped that a certain blonde shinobi had decided to stay and help Kiri get back on its feet, creating a literal army of Kage Bushin which he used to help May and the others in their repairs. Word had begun to reach many of the outlying cities in Mizu no Kuni about Naruto's amazing feat in defeating an entire army with a single jutsu and battling the former Mizukage right afterwards. Many people had begun to hail his name here as the hero of Kiri. Naruto, while appreciative of the people's good thoughts of him, could not help but a bit feel apprehensive. News of what he did here would not doubt reach the other nations despite the isolation this one had from the rest of the elemental countries. When it did, he had no doubt that he would face several issues, namely Aiwa and Akatsuki. He decided not to worry about that now as he sat in the new Mizukage office as May read over the last few reports for the day. Now that they were experiencing a new time of peace, Naruto had made sure to get to know the busty Kage under circumstances where they did not have to fear for their life. He had to say that it was fun taking May out to eat, out for a walk, or when they watched a movie after the new cinema had been built. That had been an experience since they had watched the Princess Gale movie with Yuki Fujikaze aka Koyuki Kazuhana, which many of the people including May had been shocked to see showing their hero when he was younger. All in all, it was a good experience and allowed May to get out of the office every now and then, a place that seemed to be taking up more of her time than she would have liked. Unfortunately, he now had to leave. A few days ago he received a message that Jiraiya was on his way here, and it would in fact not surprise the young blonde if the man already was here. He looked over as he felt some added weight on the couch and saw May looking at him with a curious expression. He gave her a smile. It looks like this is goodbye for now. You're leaving? She asked with a frown. She had grown close to the young man and did not want him to go. During the war, it had been her talks with him that brought her comfort and allowed her to forget all of the bloodshed, even if only for a little while. Jiraiya is probably already in town. Naruto ran a hand through his hair. Now that my mission is complete, I'm no doubt going to begin my training again. I don't really think you need any more training. May mused with a grin. I wish that were true, Naruto said with a sad smile. But once word gets out, my enemies, which are already quite numerous, will multiply. I have to be ready so I can protect not only myself but the people they will no doubt use to get to me. May sighed. Someone as young as him should not have so many enemies. She shook off the morbid thoughts. So when will I see you again? She asked. Naruto smirked at her, causing the woman to become curious. Reaching into his cloak, the blonde pulled out a tri-pronged kunai that he handed to her. We can see each other whenever. Naruto started, his smirk turning into a grin. Just make sure that you limit it to once every 2 weeks if it's not an emergency. That way I'll make sure to come whenever you call. May smiled as she closed her hand on the kunai. Thank you. Ma, you don't have to thank me, he began with a grin before affecting a mock sad expression. I would miss you far too much if we didn't get to see each other, he sniffed as he wiped away a false tear. May's smile turned into a sultry grin. Oh, perhaps I can interest you in staying so we would never be apart. You know we never tried out those hot springs together. Naruto chuckled. A part of me is definitely tempted to stay, but we both know I can't. Still, I have 2 more things I want to give you. Oh, and what's the MPH? May was silenced as Naruto brought them into a passionate lip lock. May slowly closed her eyes as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck. Naruto in turn brought his around her waist, pulling her up so she was sitting on his lap. When May opened her mouth to moan, Naruto instinctively brought his tongue into her mouth, increasing the volume and frequency of May's moaning. One of May's hands went into Naruto's hair as Naruto's hands began to rub up and down May's thighs. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily with flushed faces. Wow, was all May could think to say after the kiss. Wow indeed, Naruto said with a laugh before kissing her again. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Ready, brat. Naruto looked up to see Jiraiya standing at the entrance to Kiri. His arms were crossed and he had a smirk on his face. You bet, Ero-sensei, Naruto said as he walked past the man. Jiraiya soon caught up to Naruto and looked at him. You know you're the talk of the entire country. Yeah, I know, Naruto said, having a feeling he knew where this was going. Talks about you defeating an entire army with a single jutsu, Jiraiya continued. Yes, Ero-sensei, I used the Hiraishin to defeat the Mizukage's forces. Naruto looked at his sensei irritably. You know this may come back to bite you in the right. Naruto sighed. I know, but I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. Those people needed my help. Jiraiya was torn between being worried and being impressed. After all, his apprentice had just won a war and became a hero. You're just like your father, you know that, Gaki? He asked with a smile as he decided to go with pride. Always thinking about others before yourself, with that selfless attitude of yours. I'll take that as a compliment, Naruto said with a smirk. They continued walking in comfortable silence for a while before Jiraiya spoke again. By the way, nice job on bagging the hot Mizukage, I am impressed. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks for a second, forcing Jiraiya to stop and turn to him. That was supposed to be a private moment between me and Mei-chan, Ero-sensei. Jiraiya shivered at the tone of voice, having heard it before on another blonde when he tried to sneak a peek on Kushina. The beating he had received from that was almost worse than the time he was nearly killed for peeking on Tsunade. He quickly began to stumble back from the angry blonde as he raised his hands in front of his face defensively. And now listen, Naruto, Udoma Risengan. Big Ball Risengan. Boom. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, in the Mizukage's office, May was sitting in her chair looking out at the village with a large smile on her face, thinking back to her small makeout session with Naruto. She hoped when he visited they could do it again. Maybe when he comes back we can go to those hot springs and have other kinds of fun, she thought with a blush. As she shifted in her seat, she noticed something fall out of her dress. Picking it up, she recognized it as a letter. Opening it up, she put the letter on her desk. She began to read. Dear Mei-chan, during our time together I feel we have grown closer than most people do and would like to start a relationship with you. Before we can, however, there are several things you need to know. At the bottom of this letter is a containment seal containing information I feel will be important to our future. Inside this seal is the information I want to give you. Look it up under Article D, Clause 36. Love, Naruto. May smiled at warm feelings Naruto's letter evoked and could not help but feel curious about what he wanted her to know. Unsealing the content of the containment seal, she picked up a book and read the title, Konoha Clan Charter and Laws. Blinking in surprise at the title, she shrugged before looking for the section Naruto wanted her to read. Boom. Mei looked up startled when a loud explosion rocked the building. She saw a large ball of energy that she recognized from Naruto's fight with Yagura. Figuring that Naruto's sensei had just done something perverted, she shrugged. As if nothing had happened, she turned back to the law book she was reading. XXXXXXXXXXXX. There, it's done. In this chapter, Naruto sees the true horrors of war, meets the hot redhead Mai Terumi, and becomes a hero, again. I tried to portray the horrors of war as best as I could while adding a few romantic moments between Naruto and Mai and a few moments of comedy for relief, so let me know how you think I did. Yes, Naruto has used the Hiraishin. I figured it would be interesting to take things this way, and it may cause some problems for the blonde in the future. Also, I tried to let Naruto find some way of letting Mai know about the CRA with that last bit, though I don't know if I did a good job, so let me know if you liked it or how I can improve it. Also, I was wondering if any of you know the Japanese name of the jutsus Mai used. All I got was the release name, so if anyone knows, please send me a message or something so I can change them. About the Shinsei Henge, some of you may be curious about how the doctors were able to take off Naruto's clothes when he was in Henge, so I figured I would let you know before you actually write a review and possibly ask questions about it. Because Naruto's Henge is a physical transformation, meaning it creates a solid body out of chakra and changes Naruto's form to better fit the person or thing he turns into. The clothes that he has on are also real, since they are simply chakra constructs similar to that of a biju, except without a mind. The results for the poll are in Naruto Shippuden. Namikaze's return redux is 1 with Negima, Cage Mage coming in second place. That means that this will be the story I will be working on the most, though I will also try to get the Negima story updated as much as possible as well. The other two will come out slower, but for those who voted for the other stories, fear not, for they will come out, just not as fast. Was a quiet day in the village of Konoha as the sun began to set. Tsunade looked out over the buildings from her office in the Hokage Tower as she quietly sipped some sake. It was one of the rare moments where she had actually finished her paperwork, rather than just shove it off to the side so she could drink herself into a stupor. As she looked out of the window, she couldn't help but wonder how Naruto was doing. Last she had heard from Jiraiya via toad summoning was about a month ago, and simply stated he was doing well and still alive. It had been about a year since she had been convinced by Jiraiya that her son, brother, grandson figure needed to learn about the harsh realities of war and gain real-life experience. It made her reluctantly give Naruto a mission that she had originally been going to throw away. She hoped he was okay. If he had been hurt or killed in Kiri, she would never forgive herself for allowing Jiraiya to convince her to send the blonde there. Of course, if she found out that happened, she would give Jiraiya a reason to regret convincing her to send Naruto as well. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal Shizune walking in with a scroll. She walked over and put it on the desk for Tsunade. "It's a message from Kirigakure," Shizune said without preamble. The young woman did not know why they had sent a message out to Konoha, since they were embroiled in a civil war right now, but she assumed it was a call for help. Tsunade had not told anyone that she had actually sent help to them earlier when they had sent their first request. Everyone had assumed that she had simply tossed the mission because of their policy involving foreign affairs. Tsunade snatched the scroll from the desk as soon as those words left her assistant's mouth and unrolled it. "Thank you, Shizune," Tsunade said as she began to read. Shizune, while curious, decided not to ask as she bowed and left, closing the door behind her with a resounding click. Tsunade continued to read as the sun went down. By the time she was finished, she leaned back against her chair with a shocked expression. She had just received a message from the new Mizukage Mai Terumi. Apparently the war was over, and Mai claimed that it was over because of Naruto. Of course, given what she was reading. "That little brat," Tsunade said with a smile as she turned back to look out at the village. "It looks like I'm going to have to call a council meeting soon." XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Is this information accurate? "Yes, Danzo-sama," said a kneeling figure. "Both reports from our spies in Kiri and word going through the ranks of its shinobi have confirmed this." Danzo Shimura frowned as he tried to think about what to do with this information. Danzo had always been a very shrewd and intelligent man, having once even been a candidate for Hokage because of his talents. Though he had been beaten by Hiraishin Sarutobi for the position, Danzo had always been a player in the background, helping manipulate things along so that the village of Konoha remained safe from its enemies. His root program was one such thing, having been originally created by the Nadaime Hokage to undertake missions from the shadows and train shinobi at a young age to be tools. Danzo was a man who would use any tactic no matter how underhanded if it meant he would be able to protect his home, taking missions that Tsunade and the other Hokages would have thrown away. Of course he refused to remain in the shadows forever, he had already hatched a plan to become the next Hokage. There were just a few problems that he needed to take care of first. One of them was Tsunade. The woman, while powerful, did not understand that to keep Konoha strong they needed to be more aggressive in their approach to foreign affairs. Another problem was the information he just received. Apparently Tsunade had done something he would not have expected her capable of and sent one of their shinobi to aid in the bloodline civil war in Kiri. That shinobi was none other than Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and son of the Yondaime. Danzo of course knew of the boy's heritage. It had been a simple matter to find the information by having one of his roots steal the blood test on the boy, which had merely helped confirm his suspicions. It made sense in a way. Minato had always been one of the more noble people he had known, even when at war. It would make sense that he would not use anyone other than his own son for the sealing. He was definitely a man that Danzo had respect for, even if he did not agree with his soft policies. The problem that Danzo now had was information that Naruto had been the one responsible for granting the Kiri bloodline clan's victory. While that in itself was not quite a problem, the fact that the boy had apparently been able to recreate the Hiraishin was. Danzo had spent a long time plotting and planning for the day when the roots of Konoha could rule. This boy could be a great hindrance to his plans with the power he was gaining. Of course he could be a great asset as well, Danzo thought to himself as he tried to come up with a way to get the blonde under his thumb. If he could somehow get the boy under his control, it would make Danzo's plans that much easier to accomplish. He would bide his time. The boy was to come back in 2 years, and in that time Danzo would start to make his move. The one-eyed man looked over at his subordinate still in a kneeling position. I want the boy's progress monitored and I want to be sent weekly reports. Get it done. Hi Danzo-sama. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Halt. Naruto and Jiraiya stopped as one of the Volt shinobi stepped in front of them. Foreign ninja are not allowed in without a passport. Jiraiya stuck a hand in his vest and pulled out 2 small red books. We've got our passports right here. As the man looked over the passports, Naruto studied the Volt officer's outfit. Volt was Kumo's version of the Anbu that Konoha was so famous for. They were typically assigned into 3 branches of the military: assassination, combat and warfare, C and W, and the last one torture and interrogation, I and T, much like the Anbu of Konoha. Their attire was also very similar to the Anbu, with the difference being in the colors of their vest, which was white rather than black. The Volt officer nodded. Very well, these look to be in order. Try not to cause any trouble and enjoy your stay here in Kumo. Jiraiya nodded and the 2 of them passed through the gates and made their way into the village. Naruto used the time they were walking to look around and study Kumo's layout. Like all of the hidden villages, Kumo had not strayed far from the original design that all of the great shinobi nations possess, which were created during the founding of the hidden villages during the First Great War. However, unlike Konoha, Kumo had not demilitarized themselves like many of the others had after the Third War. This was evidenced as Naruto looked around at most of the people who were milling about. It was easy to tell that aside from the children, nearly 75% of Kumo's population were ninja from the way they walked, their walks being far more graceful than civilians. It was also the only place where Naruto had seen people with such dark skin. Kumo had a large history of attempting to seek an edge over other hidden villages. During the Second and First Shinobi Wars, Kumo had attempted kidnapping several people who possessed special abilities. Naruto knew that after the Third War Hinata had an attempted kidnapping on her, which resulted in the death of Hisashi Hyuga, the clan head's brother. Fortunately, after that debacle, the Third Raikage had lost much of his power as people became dissatisfied with his rule. This led to the Fourth Raikage, taking the man's place. He did not know much about the Raikage, except that he apparently had no interest in bloodlines and respected strength. At least that was what he heard from Jiraiya's spy network. They made their way into a large stone tower, which was situated in the middle of the village. Naruto could easily recognize it as the Raikage Tower from its similar appearance to the Hokage Tower in Konoha, except it was made of stone and concrete. Walking inside, Naruto followed Jiraiya to the top floor where the man stopped in front of a desk. The woman who was sitting at the desk looked up at the white-haired Sennin. "Can I help you?" she asked. Jiraiya grinned. "Yes, I believe we have an appointment with the Raikage." Name: Jiraiya. The woman looked through her notebook as she searched for the name, eventually finding it. Nodding to him, she went over to the door and knocked on it. "Raikage-sama, Jiraiya is here. Send him in." The woman opened the door as Jiraiya and Naruto walked in, though not before the Toad Sennin tossed the young woman a wink, which said woman ignored as she went back to her desk. Naruto took a look around the room and noticed it was pretty bland. There was not much around that really caught his interest aside from the few posters with weights on them. "Ah, Jiraiya-sama, I have been expecting you." Naruto turned his attention to see a rather large man getting up from behind the desk with what looked like a dumbbell in his hand, which was promptly dropped, causing several cracks to appear in the stone floor. It was a very large, muscular man with slicked back white hair and a small mustache. He was wearing his cage hat and robe without a shirt underneath, allowing others to see his Hulk-like physique. Each wrist had a gold bracelet with protrusions sticking out of them. It was easy for Naruto to tell that the man was a taijutsu specialist, one who most likely used his large frame to smash up and overpower his enemies. "And this is Naruto." Naruto blinked as he turned his attention to the conversation that had apparently been taking place. He looked at the Raikage with unflinching blue eyes as the man studied him. For just a moment the Raikage could have sworn it was another spiky-haired blonde who was looking at him with those same eyes. There had only ever been one man who had the look Naruto had. The resemblance is uncanny as well. I wonder if, he shook the thoughts away. After a few moments, grinned. "It's nice to meet you, kid." The Raikage stuck out his hand, which Naruto took without hesitation. Naruto soon found out that the man had a very firm grip. Deciding he was not one to be outdone, Naruto used his own strength, which he had taken to enhancing along with his speed. He squeezed the Raikage's hand hard enough to let the man know he also had a great deal of physical prowess, even if it did not show. "A pleasure to meet you as well, Raikage Dono," Naruto said with a feral grin. "Haha." The Raikage laughed as he felt the kid's grip, which was far stronger than he had expected it to be. "I like you, kid. You've got a firm grip. That shows you're strong." Naruto grinned. "I've always been told I have more bronze than brains. Besides, who needs to think when you can just smash enemy shinobi right through a wall? Action and power are what shinobi respect the most." The Raikage chuckled as he went behind his desk and pulled out a small box. "You know what, you're exactly right. I like you, and because of that I'm going to give you these." He held out a box of protein bars. Naruto blinked as he looked at the box of protein bars, unsure of what to do. He looked up at the Raikage to see the man looking expectantly and realized this was most likely the man's way of showing respect. "Thank you, Raikage Dono," Naruto replied as he took the box. "These will help increase my physical performance and training greatly." "Ha, it's no problem, kid," the Raikage said before turning to Jiraiya. "I have a hotel for the two of you already prepared." He handed Jiraiya a letter with directions to the hotel. Jiraiya nodded in thanks before turning to Naruto and handing him the directions. "I have some business to discuss with Raikage Dono. I want you to go to the hotel. You can explore for a while if you want, but don't cause any trouble, okay?" Naruto sighed. "Who do you take me for, Ero-sensei? If anyone's going to get in trouble, it will be you when you decide to go peeping into the hot springs." "Stupid Gaki," Jiraiya mumbled. Naruto looked over at the Raikage. I don't want to be too much trouble, but I was wondering if there were any training grounds you would be willing to let me use. The Raikage thought it over. Yes, I know of a few you could use. You can use the ones on the east side of the village. Not many people go to those ones, so they should be open. Naruto nodded his head and left. As soon as the blonde was gone, the atmosphere shifted as the two left in the room took on a more serious expression. So what do you know about Akatsuki? Asked Jiraiya. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Yugito swore to herself as she made her way to the training ground where she had been told the person she had been assigned to watch most likely was. She could not understand why she was the one doing this. There were other people who could do just as well with such an assignment. She should be undertaking more dangerous tasks than this, things like assassinations and defeating powerful ninja. She was the Nibi Jinchuriki for Kami's sake. Yet the Raikage had been rather adamant that she be the one to watch over this boy, who was apparently very important, though the Raikage refused to mention why. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Flashback. You can't be serious, Raikage-sama. Yugito said in disbelief. You want me to babysit some brat from another village? Anyone could easily do such a task. Why not assign it to Team Samui? Hell, even just one of them should be more than adequate for this mission. The Raikage frowned. He knew the reason Yugito did not want to be stuck on such a mission. Unlike his brother Killer Bee, the young blonde woman was not nearly as respected. While a few of the civilians of Kumo hailed her as a hero, they still tended to remain weary of her, often keeping away for the most part. Add on that many of the shinobi resented her for her ability and Jinchuriki status, as well as the fact that some of the members on the council disliked her, and I could see why she wanted to prove herself. Every day Yugito tried as hard as she could to move out of Bee's shadow and become respected by her ninja peers and the people of this village. Yugito, this is quite possibly one of the most important missions I will ever assign you or anyone else, the Raikage said in a serious voice. This seemed to catch the young woman by surprise for a moment, before her face went back to a small scowl. What's so special about this kid anyway? She asked. The Raikage laughed. There is quite a bit that is special about him. If you complete this mission, I will share it with you. Flashback end. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Not only had the Raikage been extremely vague on what made this boy so important, he also would not let anyone else but her take it. Finally, she reached the training ground and found herself with a front row seat to an impressive sight. The person she had been assigned to watch was indeed there. However, he was doing an exercise that the young woman was sure would even make the Raikage and his brother think twice about trying. The man, a young blonde, was currently balancing on a kunai with one finger as he did several one-armed push-ups. Sticking to his body were several decently sized rocks that blonde was no doubt using chakra to keep in place. Balanced on his feet were two large 4-foot boulders, one for each foot. He was currently blindfolded with Hidia 8 over his eyes, while several bushins of some kind were standing around him in a circle. The boy was only wearing a pair of pants as he worked, allowing Yugito to see a physique that, while not large like A's or Karabi's, was extremely well defined. It was lithe, firm, and reminded her of a panther or some kind of powerful predator, no doubt his body designed for a combination of intense speed and strength. She could see the ripple of his muscles every time the young man would move. Watching him caused an unusual heat to rise to her cheeks. He's quite an impressive specimen, isn't he, kitten? Nibi, the one and only kitten, was the answer she received through her mind. Back to the topic, that young Tom is quite an impressive and handsome young man, don't you think? Well, you should go talk to him, then once you two are acquainted, take him to your room and. Nibi, Yugito said as a blush began to spread across her cheeks. Oh, come on, kitten, don't be such a Nazi. Nibi said. Go out, talk to the man, and then ride him until you drive. I can't believe you, Yugito commented incredulously, though there was a large blush staining her cheeks and a small amount of blood trickling down her nose before she wiped it away. All you think about is, why can't you ever just give it a rest? Because you need a man in your life, kitten. You turn down men left and right. It's getting rather difficult to watch, besides just look at those muscles. Yugito immediately tuned the Nibby's perverted ranting out, though she could not keep the blush from her face. She looked back over to the young man who had switched arms. She couldn't deny that he was handsome. Ridiculously so, in fact. But she couldn't get herself involved with anyone, aside from the fact that she needed to work twice as hard as other ninja to get any respect. She was also a Jinchuriki. The few men who had taken an interest in her were not into her because they liked her, but because they wanted her body and to claim they had with Kumo's famed Jinchuriki. Bragging rights was all she was. You know that's not true, kitten. You just haven't found anyone yet. Yugito sighed but gave a mental nod, not wanting to argue with her tenant at this point. Instead, she turned her attention back to the young man. He was still going at his workout routine. As she watched, she saw the clones that were surrounding him take out several kunai and without warning started launching them at him. She was just about to yell out in warning when her fellow blonde took out his own kunai and began deflecting the attacks, even as he continued to do push-ups. The few he couldn't block, like the ones behind him, were dodged, using the boulders on his feet as a counterbalance to each other as he leaned his body from one side to the other as he dodged the kunai. In all her years, Yugito had never seen anyone who had such a ridiculously dangerous training regime. She watched him for what seemed like hours, but in truth was only about 30 minutes as the man continued training. When it was done, the clones dispelled and the man kicked the boulders off him and the rocks on his body dropped. Yugito watched as the man flipped himself off of the kunai, landing on his feet as he took off his Hiraishin from around his eyes. Yugito, assuming that he was going to go home, and turned around to leave. Only for a hand landed on her shoulder and a voice to whisper in her ear. "And just where do you think you're going, Yugito yelped as she spun around and saw the blonde looking at her with an amused expression. Her eyes widened in surprise at how fast he had gotten to her. It hadn't even been a second since she had turned. That kind of speed was something she had never seen in anyone before. Seeing as how she wasn't going to answer, Naruto took a moment to look at the young woman. He had to hold in a whistle at how beautiful she was. She might even rival Mei. At a guess, he would have to say the woman was in her mid to late 20s and carried an aura that all serious ninja posses. Her hair was blonde, much like himself. However, rather than his golden sun-kissed blonde, hers was a pale shade closer to that of the Yamanaka clan. It was tied in a long ponytail that reached her lower back. Her Hiraishin was wrapped around her head, keeping her bangs from falling into her eyes and face. She was wearing a black short-sleeved shirt with a purple piece of what looked like body armor that covered from her stomach to the middle of her. She was wearing standard black shinobi pants, a violet bandana that crossed her hips, and standard black shinobi sandals. Her body was the kind he was beginning to suspect were a standard when it came to strong kunoichi. It was very lithe and agile looking, with a grace that reminded him strangely enough of a cat. Yet it still held a generous amount of curves. Her legs were strong and slender, looking rather well-defined muscles, yet still retaining their femininity. Her hips were not wide, but neither were they narrow, and also had nice definition. Attached to the back of her hips was a perfectly round and firm bottom. She had a slender and toned stomach that moved up into a set of perky and perfectly sized that were around a mid-D cup. Naruto looked up at her face, which was a mixture of slightly oval and heart-shaped, with two emerald green eyes which were very feline in the way they were slightly slanted. Naruto favored her with a sly grin. "So what's a beautiful woman such as yourself doing spying on little old me? Ooh, I think I'm going to like him, kitten." Yugito felt her face heat up at that comment as she tried to think of something to say. I wasn't spying, I was passing through, and well, you see, Naruto laughed as the woman literally tripped over herself to explain what she was doing here. Naruto already guessed the Raikage had sent her to watch over him while Ero-sensei spoke with the man. No doubt to make sure he not only stayed out of trouble but also to see his skills, something that most hidden villages usually do when a foreign shinobi is present. Yugito's blush instantly became a scowl. "What's so funny?" Naruto chuckled as he waved a hand in front of his face as if toward the woman off. "Sorry, it's just that I've never seen a kunoichi get so flustered." Or at least not a serious kunoichi like you obviously are. Yugito blinked, unsure whether she had just been given a compliment or an insult. Are you insulting me? Not at all, Naruto replied. I was just teasing you a little, that's all. Though I would still like to know why you were spying on me. Yugito was instantly cowed. Sorry, I was just passing through to the training field I usually use when I heard you practicing. I guess I just got caught up in watching you. Yugito's eyes widened as she realized how her words could be taken. I mean, I was watching you train. No, I mean watching your training regime, I mean. Naruto grinned at the hole she had just dug herself in. Not being able to pass up such a glorious opportunity, he walked up until he was right next to her. So you got caught up watching me, I take it you like what you see then. Kitten, this one is perfect. Take him now and ride him till you howl at the mo. God damn it, Nibi, shut up. Yugito blushed as she tried to speak but could not come up with anything. That blushing soon increased as Nibi began sending images of a Naruto and her in various positions. She looked over at the blonde only to blush more as she realized not only how close he was but that his body looked even better up close. Unable to stop herself, Yugito's eyes wandered up and down the blonde mont's well-toned physique. She stopped when she got to his face and noticed the knowing grin he was giving her. She looked away as another blush stained her cheeks. You're a lot bolder than most, Naruto said with a foxy grin. We don't even know each other's names yet and you're already stripping me with your eyes. I wasn't. Yugito tried to deny it, yet the fact that her face was beet red took any credence she may have had away. Not knowing what else to do, she let her anger get the better of her and with a small huff began walking away. Seeing her leave, Naruto ran to catch up with her, placing a hand on her shoulder to get her to stop. Hey look, I'm sorry. Naruto apologized. I didn't mean to tease you so much. Naruto blinked as he paused and thought, well, I did, but I didn't mean to make you mad. Yugito looked at him as she used the enhanced senses Nibi gave her to try and detect a lie. To her surprise, she found none and that his apology was completely genuine. She decided to offer him a small smile. It's okay, I guess. I supposed I deserved it for intruding on your training. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Not at all. I'm a foreign ninja, so it's only natural you would be curious about how I train. That reminds me, Yugito said, what was that training regime you just did? I don't think I've ever seen someone do something so insane before. Naruto gave a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his neck. Actually, it's a training exercise I set up for myself. Yugito raised an eyebrow as he continued, it's designed to make me split my attention on numerous exercises. The rocks sticking to my body are a more difficult version of the leaf sticking exercise that the academy in Konoha has. Balancing myself on a kunai increases the difficulty in chakra control as well. The boulders are used as weights and balancers to keep me in balance, especially when my clones begin to toss kunai into the mix. I use push-ups to increase the physical difficulty of the exercise and the blindfold is to increase my senses other than sight. This also helps with my spatial awareness. Yugito listened to Naruto's explanation and found herself greatly impressed with what was obviously a well-thought-out workout. It was kind of like an all-in-one extreme training routine. It would allow someone to get the maximum effect out of their exercise while also being something one could do on the road if so desired. So anyways, Naruto said, snapping Yugito out of her thoughts. I would like to make up for my teasing you. You really don't have to. Yugito started only to be interrupted by the young blonde. I know, but I want to, Naruto said as he gave her a charming smile, so I would like to make it up to you, Ms. It's Yugito, she told him with a light blush spreading across her cheeks. Yugito, huh? That's a beautiful name, Naruto said with a smile, causing the young woman to blush again. Are you doing anything tomorrow? Yugito tilted her head as she looked thoughtful before shaking her head. No, I don't have anything particular that I'm doing tomorrow. Her job was to watch him, so she would technically not be doing anything. Why do you ask? Well, I was wondering if you would allow me to take you out to dinner tomorrow, say around 7 o'clock. 18th time in the last hour. Yugito began to smooth out her dress as she continued to pace the room to her apartment. She could not deny that she was nervous. Despite being extremely confident in her abilities as a kunoichi, she had a hard time being confident in her abilities as a woman. Not because of any problems she had with her looks, Yugito was well aware that many people in Kumo thought she was beautiful. Her problem stemmed from the fact that she had never really focused on being a woman. Her duties as a ninja had always kept her occupied enough that even if people asked her, she would never be able to go out on a dates and the like. The few times she had been out, it was always with the small circle of friends she had, namely Killer Bee's students. You worry too much, kitten. Yugito stopped smoothing out her dress as she addressed her tenant. I've never done this before, Nibby. What happens if I do something wrong and screw this up? Yugito heard Nibby giggle in her mind. What's this? Is Yugito-chan worried about making a good impression on her date? Yugito face flushed red. That's not it at all. I just wanted to make sure that I leave a good impression on him so that it doesn't reflect badly on Kumo. You know I'm not buying that ridiculous excuse. Yugito was about to reply when she was snapped out of her conversation by the doorbell ringing. She walked over to the door knowing that it was most likely Naruto. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed out her dress one more time. Opening the door, she came out to greet Naruto, only to find all of her breath leaving her. Naruto was not in the shinobi clothing she had seen him in today or yesterday. Instead, he was dressed in a set of well-maintained civilian clothes. He was wearing a pair of dark brown dress shoes which were polished to a shine. For pants, he had on a pair of black slacks with creases on the sides. His shirt was a black short-sleeve collared shirt with dark orange stripes running down the side of the sleeves. Yugito could see that the shirt seemed strained in certain places, mainly his pectorals and biceps, showing that while he was not overly large, he still had strong muscles. Seeing the young woman stare, Naruto grinned. So you like what you see, Yugito-chan? For several moments Yugito blinked as she tried to reboot her mental functions and decipher what Naruto said. When she did, her face began turning bright red. As she began to sputter and make excuses about why she was staring, Naruto took the time to look her over. When she was wearing her shinobi clothing, Naruto could easily tell Yugito was a beautiful woman, but with a dress on she looked absolutely stunning. Yugito was wearing a dark purple strapless dress that seemed to hug the contours of her body, showing off the luscious curves in ways her ninja clothing couldn't. The dress ended just above the knees and started just a little below the upper part of her chest, allowing Naruto a nice view of her cleavage, which seemed to be pushed up by the dress, making them even perkier than they already were. She had let her hair out of the ponytail, allowing Naruto to see it in all its glory as it hung down her back freely. It also looked like she had used some kind of special shampoo or something because it had a brilliant shine to it and looked extremely soft. Naruto also noticed that she had just a small touch of makeup on. Her lips were a light red from lipstick and she had a small amount of purple eyeline which brought out the beautiful and exotic look of her eyes. All in all, she was beautiful. Naruto breathed, unaware that he had spoken out loud. Yugito felt heat rise to her face at the odd tone in Naruto's voice. She put her head down so he would not see how red her cheeks were getting. Do you really think so? She asked in a low voice. Naruto blinked as he realized that he must have spoken his thoughts. He reached out with his left hand and put his thumb and forefinger under her chin, raising it up so she could see his smile. I have rarely met anyone who could match how beautiful you look right now. Yugito felt herself actually becoming somewhat faint from the compliment. No one had ever said something like that to her and actually meant it. The few who had, she was easily able to smell the lust coming off them. She willed herself not to pass out and took several deep breaths as she steadied her heart rate, which had been beating far faster than she had ever felt it even after her toughest training routine. Once she steadied herself, Yugito offered him a dazzling smile, which literally seemed to light up her face. Thank you. Naruto grinned as he stuck out his arm. Shall we? Smiling just a little wider, Yugito wrapped her own arms around his after she closed and locked the door to her apartment. The two walked along the streets making small conversation as Yugito told Naruto the directions to her favorite sushi bar, which was where he had decided to take her to. As they walked, Naruto noticed the odd looks Yugito was getting from some of the populace. No doubt they were surprised to see her not only with a man but in a dress of all things. It was easy for Naruto to see that the young woman was not one for dressing up. In fact, it amused him that he could still see the shopping tag on her dress, meaning either she never wore it and so forgot to take it off, or she had just bought it recently and didn't even see it. He figured it was the latter. Naruto also noticed that he seemed to be getting many glares from the males of the village. It was rather easy to see they were jealous. In the one day he had known her, it was plain to Naruto that Yugito was not really the kind of person who would go out on dates and whatnot. In fact, given how nervous she seemed, chances were good that this was her first date ever. Given how attractive the blonde woman was, he knew that at least some of the men here had probably asked her out, most likely to be turned down the moment the request for a date left their mouths. Then along comes this new guy, a foreigner no less, and in less than a day gets a date with one of the most desirable women in Kumo. It was rather easy to see why they were jealous of him. Not that he cared. They arrived at the sushi bar and made their way inside, seating themselves at 2 seats at the bar. The way Yugito moved to the seat gave Naruto a hunch that it was reserved for her, much like his own seat at the Ichiraku ramen. The thought of the ramen stand and the 2 people who were like family to him brought a smile to his face. "Oi, Kenshi-san, can I have the usual please?" Naruto watched as an old man came out of the back, wiping his hands off with a rag. The man had the same air about him that old man Tuki had. Naruto figured it must be a chef thing. "Wow, Yugito-chan, look at you all dressed up," Kenshi said with a smile as he looked between her and Naruto. "I take it you're actually on a date, nay? About time if you ask me." Kenshi," Yugito said with a small whine as her face began to heat up. Kenshi just laughed. "So one of the usual And what can I get for your date?" he asked, turning to Naruto. Naruto smiled. "I'll have the same thing she's having." Kenshi actually looked surprised before shrugging. "You must have quite the appetite if you're gonna eat that. They'll be right up." With that said, Kenshi went into the back room to get supplies to make the food. While the food was being prepared, Naruto and Yugito engaged in some conversation, telling each other about their experience as ninja. For the most part, they left out anything that could be considered delicate information, such as some of the classified missions they had gone on. Yugito normally just told her fellow blonde shinobi about the different places she visited in her time as a genin under Killer Bee's tutelage, making sure to leave out her Jinchuriki status as Naruto was a foreigner. As for Naruto himself, he regaled her in tales of his accomplishments when his team had just started, telling her about his first C-rank mission where they had taken on Zabuza Momoichi and his mission to protect Koyuki Kazuhana. Yugito had to admit she was impressed that a mere team of genin had accomplished missions of that caliber, though he did have Kakashi Hatake as his sensei, so it was not too much to think such feats were possible. A few minutes after the conversation began to die down, the food arrived. Naruto was shocked to see that it was 10 servings of each dish of sushi they served here. Naruto had never seen so much sushi in his entire life. "Wow, when you said I better have an appetite, you really meant it." Kenshi laughed as he went into the back of the store again. Yugito looked at Naruto with a smirk as he stared at the incredible amounts of sushi. "If you can't eat it all, I'd be more than happy to take it off your hands." Naruto looked over at Yugito and saw the challenging look in her eyes. He gave her his patented foxy grin. "Not a chance. This will all be gone long before you can even think of sinking your paws into it," Naruto stated in a confident tone. Yugito gave him a challenging grin. "Ooh, wanna make a bet?" XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Jiraiya sighed as he entered the hotel room he was sharing with Naruto. It had taken a lot of effort and negotiation on his part, but he had finally convinced the Raikage to allow Killer Bee to help Naruto train in using his Biju's chakra. He had been forced to not only give up all the information he had on Akatsuki, but he was also forced to send Tsunade a message asking for 4 jutsu from each element to give to Kumo as payment. It had been a hassle to get Tsunade to give them up and had taken longer than he had expected because of that. Still, the Toad Sennin felt it was worth the effort. He had received information that Akatsuki would begin to make their moves sometime within the next year. His apprentice, while strong, would not last in a fight with two S-class ninja without some kind of trump card. In other words, his student needed to learn to harness the Kyuubi's chakra as best he could within the next year. Moving into the bedroom, Jiraiya frowned when he noticed his apprentice was not there. Figuring that he was just out practicing since the white-haired man had not received a message via toad summons nor felt any spike in Naruto's chakra, the man decided to get some rest. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Yugito patted Naruto on the cheek as she gave him a condescending smile. There, you should have known I would win. Really now, Naruto, that look doesn't suit you. Naruto just continued to pout. He couldn't believe he had lost in an eating contest. The only person who had ever been able to out-eat him in anything was Choji, and even then the Akamaiki heir couldn't do it with some things like ramen. He couldn't believe that this woman had not only scarfed down her entire sushi platter but managed to steal at least half of his as well. It was not fair. You cheated, Naruto sniffed with his pout still in place. Yugito guffawed. You're just upset because you lost and now owe me. At that comment, Naruto's pout disappeared and was replaced with a smile that Yugito was coming to recognize. Speaking of owing, you never told me what it is you want from me. Yugito hummed in thought as the two got up and left the restaurant, beginning to make their way to her apartment. I haven't decided yet, she said as she began to tap her chin. Naruto grinned as he closed the distance between them. I've been told I give a pretty good message. If you wanted, I could do that. Naruto started as his grin became larger. Who knows, we may even be able to make it a full body message. Yugito stumbled as a large blush spread across her face. She looked over at Naruto and opened her mouth only to close it as she could not find anything to say. After opening and closing her mouth a few more times, she just huffed and began walking again, making Naruto chuckle as he caught up. They stayed like that for a while, just walking in comfortable silence as the two went into their own thoughts.